Welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. Did the third party ruin the vote? We get this question a lot. We get this every time there's a close race, something heavily contested. And usually with a race where people are very dissatisfied with the establishment options or the established options. In this most recent case, we had an anti-establishment option, but he was, they spent 4 years destroying his character, negating any positive, refusing to report any positive. It was a worldwide, global funded level, absolute horror show. I can't imagine having that many millions of people tell me everything I do, from going to the bathroom to putting ketchup on my food, is evil. All day, every day. No positives. No one's even willing to say, hey, are you a person? Nothing. I want you to imagine what an election would have looked like without that. You may be one of the people who believes it's objective fact that this guy was horrible. But what if you weren't told that all day, every day, for basically 5 years? Kind of interesting. I think you would have seen an incredibly different election, and this is one of those things that you need to really think about when you think about how much control, information control, news control you give to corporations, multinational, cosmopolitan corporations. I mean, that's really what they're about. They're about a one world, global, cosmopolitan aristocracy. Well, so what happens when a third party gets involved? What happens is that there's always a third party, a fourth party, a fifth party. We had 4 presidential candidates on our ballot. The Constitution Party guy, is also there's various party names in various states. He had a good enough showing to make the party itself potentially have some teeth, and it's possible that the Constitutionalist Party could actually grow to outpace the Libertarian Party for a whole lot of various reasons, which is a totally different video. Joe Jorgensen took enough ballots in enough states to have flipped the election either way if you figure that those votes would have gone predominantly Trump. Since libertarianism is considered right-wing, and since Trump is at the very least looking for less federal regulation, there's some really good arguments that the vast majority, 75-80%, would have gone Trump. And that would have flipped all debate about the election, because at that point, unless they increased the cheating levels to match, which they could have done, we're looking at a situation where that's it. Well, and then you look at Perot. Perot probably, according to a lot of people, lost Bush his election. Maybe. Okay. The problem is that you're always dealing with a candidate where you can't quite figure out how they get that much. Okay? Perot had a strange amount of libertarian, at the time, libertarian support for what was realistically a nearly relatively socially liberal in some senses, but otherwise extremely rigid, almost neo-fascist social program. I mean, he was a progressive. He wasn't labeled progressive in the current sense of the culture war, but he was basically a highly progressive dude in classical, call it paleo-progressive terms. He got he got a protest vote, but it's not that the people really wanted his psychological testing regimes or his so some of the social programs, he got a protest vote, but it wasn't about what he was, whether he was qualified. Jo Jorgensen also got a protest vote this time. And it has nothing to do with her and the third party because she's just an incredibly unqualified person. There's almost no one that the libertarians could have fielded that would have been worse. And I hate to say that because this is not a personal attack on any of my libertarian friends, but you know, the real politics is the art of the possible, and you have to be able to at least handle the possible, define the possible. People who really can't comprehend that there's no such thing as free trade with a communist regime because they're not free. It's whatever. Very unqualified person. She didn't get that much of a protest vote because of her. Okay, Perot didn't get that much of a protest vote because of him. She got the protest vote because, I think, of the gun lobby. Now hear me out, okay? Gun culture has changed a little bit. Back when Bush lost his re-election, this is the first Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush. He lost his re-election. There's a whole lot of various different opinions people have about that, but the main one is actually, I think, gun culture. There's still a feeling, even though you can't ever get the big wins that the Democrats insist they can on gun control, there's this feeling that the media has fed you this idea that gun culture is a fringe 0.5%, 0.1% of America that somehow runs the elections because of secret conspiracies and the NRA and stuff like that. And that's really not true. Gun culture is huge in America. It always has been huge in America. And most of the people who, oh man, it's so hard to go down this road. People think, the word in the gun culture is FUD, okay? Someone who is an Elmer FUD, who only believes that you should have a single barrel shotgun or a double barrel shotgun for hunting purposes only, and that's what the Second Amendment is. That's not true. One of the things you have to understand is that the majority of the people who were voting at the time of Bush's re-election were war affected. Okay, they'd either been in World War II, their families had been in World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Remember that this is 30 years ago. All right, this is a long time ago. This is a lifetime ago. For most of you people, this is literally before you were politically aware or born. Okay, and a lot of the people that you're talking about are no longer there. But don't think that the World War II generation didn't know what gun rights were. Okay, remember that these are people who went through and dealt very directly with the anti-freedom movements coming out of the Soviet Union. They've seen what dictatorships look like. They may not be like, yeah, everyone should run around Walmart with an AR-15, but that's not, you can't tell, you're not going to get a lot of support from them if you say that military rifles are not covered under the Second Amendment. And notice that the gun control attacks at the time weren't actually put in those terms. No one was going to try to take away your M1 Garand or your M1 carbine. Some of the first assault weapons bans on the state levels actually specifically exempted the M1 carbine, even if it was used in the signature crime that made the stuff happen, because they knew they knew that people knew what that was, and people were going to start to look at the gun control a little funny when you start taking away the actual realistic militia defensive arms. So what happened with Bush was you had a lot of ill-informed people who didn't like the general anti-freedom sentiment. Remember that most people don't actually know everything about every issue in politics, okay? It's not extremely common for someone who really cares about abortion to know anything about EBT laws, welfare laws, First Amendment laws, except as it applies to their right to protest, deeper First Amendment laws, Fourth Amendment protections, that they're not going to really, they're going to know nothing about gun legislation. Well, there's a lot of people who just go hunting. Their biggest involvement with politics is around a bar at a hunt or an Elks meeting or whatever. And gun control becomes a very important issue. It becomes a signature issue really fast. And a lot of people in 92 didn't show up. A lot of the gun culture just said, not gonna, 6 to 1, half dozen to the other, Bush has already fucked us. That's the thing. Bush did soft gun bans. He did things like eliminating the import of military-style rifles, but regular stuff, and a lot of this is stuff that's either it has historical value or collector value, or it has specific collector purpose. People do not actually want to import HK-33s because they think they're going to walk down the street shooting people. These are expensive guns. They just want something that's accurate, right, for their collection. And they may want to shoot it, and they may do tactical classes with it because people do that. But these are not people. They're not gangbangers. They're not the criminal element. There was no reason to do that, and Bush lost a lot of support from not being an advocate for Second Amendment rights. And you can be an advocate for Second Amendment rights without falling into the trap of the anti-gun argument. That's tactics, and that's a different story. But the protest vote was a lot of people who were pissed off because, again, it was, well, this party wants to ban guns, this party says they don't, but then they do it anyway. Distrust for the establishment. And a lot of that does center on 2-3 main areas, because they're obvious and easy areas, okay? Gun rights. All gun control is poorly written, has unintended consequences, and has no real effect beyond pissing off gun owners. The problem here is there is no good, well-done gun control, so there's no way you can point at anything except pissing off gun owners. First Amendment, okay, is usually a big trigger, and taxes. So you tend to get the protest vote and the anti-establishment vote on these 3 key areas. There are people in the Christian right who will vote for a candidate who they morally hate just because of First Amendment issues. Okay? Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. Remember that. Okay? At one point in time, the Christians were not so nice, but once you start persecuting, then they're defending rights, then the flavor of things changes. Okay? It's hard to be good when you become the tyrant. Little hint for the left there. Taxes are a wedge issue because taxes are almost always framed in a punitive sense. You have to watch that. And Second Amendment, because there is no set of gun control proposals that ever has anything to do with reality. To be completely fair to Donald Trump, probably the closest we ever came was the bump stock ban. And that was complete bullshit. But that's the closest we've ever come. There's no... I don't know if you're not a gun person, you don't get exactly how lame that sounds, or how amazingly bad gun control actually is. But if you hit those issues, that's where you start changing ballots. The protest vote for Perot wasn't about Perot's stance on gun rights. It wasn't about Perot's stance on abortion or the First Amendment. It was that he was not the establishment, and the establishment lied. The establishment violated the trust. Taxes, First Amendment, Second Amendment, these are all very big, easy ones. It's really hard, as we've shown since 9/11, it's very hard to get people riled up about the Fourth Amendment, okay, no matter how much you violate it. Fifth Amendment becomes kind of like a little, it becomes a talking point when you have protest movements and stuff, but where it comes down to actual voters and protest votes and third parties, it's First Amendment, Second Amendment, and taxes. So yes, Joe Jorgensen votes probably changed the outcome of our election, modulo how much cheating they did. But it wasn't Joe Jorgensen that did it, it was the protest. My big problem with this election cycle is that I think a lot of that protest vote was engineered by outright intentional propaganda that the American people have no power to get away from, to stop, or to sidestep. We have total corporate control of your information systems, and that's a bad thing. All right, so remember, protest vote is actually a protest vote. Stay sideways.